I stood at the back of the funeral home watching my brother Marcus deliver Mom's eulogy in his perfectly pressed navy suit, his voice steady and authoritative as he painted a picture of our family that didn't include me, at least not the real me. To everyone gathered there, I was still Emma the dropout, Emma the disappointment, Emma who worked at some little bookstore downtown while Marcus ran a successful tech consulting firm. But what Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I owned 60% of his company through a web of shell corporations I had built over the past 8 years. The irony wasn't lost on me as I listened to him talk about Mom's legacy, about family values, about taking care of each other when he hadn't taken care of anyone except himself. For the past decade, I had been the one paying for Mom's experimental treatments when insurance wouldn't cover them. I had been the one ensuring Dad's assisted living facility never sent a bill. I had been the invisible hand keeping our family afloat while they all believed Marcus was the successful one. It started innocently enough back when Marcus was fresh out of business school, drowning in student loans and big dreams he needed startup capital for. His consulting firm and the banks wouldn't touch him. I was 26 then, working 3 jobs and attending night classes to finish my computer science degree. But I had saved every penny I could since I was 16. I believed in him. I believed in family. So I gave him $40,000, my entire savings. But I was smarter than he gave me credit for. I didn't just hand over the money. I structured it as an investment through a limited partnership. I had my lawyer friend Sarah draft the paperwork. Marcus was so desperate and so focused on the cash that he barely read the terms. He signed away 30% ownership for that initial funding and agreed to automatic reinvestment clauses that would increase my stake if he ever needed additional capital. He needed additional capital many times. Over the years, as his business grew, I remained the silent partner funneling money through different entities whenever he hit cash flow problems. A late payment from a major client, a botched project that went over budget, equipment failures that required immediate replacement each time. I structured the assistance as debt that converted to equity when payments were missed. Marcus always missed the payments. By year 3, I owned 45%. By year 5, I owned 52%. By last year, I owned 60% of Marcus Hartwell. Consulting the company he introduced himself as CEO and founder of at every networking event, every family gathering, every conversation with strangers. On airplanes, the beautiful part was how legitimate it all appeared on paper. Marcus had built a reputation as a savvy businessman who had attracted multiple angel investors over the years. He just never bothered to dig deep enough to realize all. Those angel investors were me operating under different corporate structures. Meridian Capital Holdings, Westbridge Investment Group, Summit Ventures, LLC, all registered to P.O. boxes, all managed by lawyers, all feeding back to my master holding company, Quantum Financial Solutions. I had become obsessed with corporate structures and financial engineering, partly out of necessity, and partly because I discovered I had a gift for it while Marcus was networking and giving presentations I was studying. Securities law, tax optimization, and international business formation. I earned my computer science degree, then added an MBA specializing in corporate finance. I learned how to move money, how to hide ownership, how to build empires that existed only on paper. The funeral reception was held at the country club Marcus had joined last year. Another expense I had indirectly funded through his generous salary and bonuses he approved for himself. I stood near the dessert table holding a cup of bitter coffee, watching relatives and family friends shake his hand and tell him what a wonderful job he had done with the business. How proud Mom would have been of his success. Aunt Patricia approached me with that look people get when they're about to deliver unwelcome advice. "Emma, dear," she said in her syrupy voice, "when are you going to get serious about your future? Your brother has done so well for himself. Maybe he could help you find a real career." I smiled politely and nodded the way I always did. "I'm happy where I am." "But working in a bookstore," Patricia continued, "it's not really building anything, is it not, like what Marcus has accomplished?" I excused myself and walked outside onto the club's manicured lawn. My phone buzzed with notifications from my various business apps, stock alerts, cryptocurrency updates, notifications from my investment portfolio. I managed over $200 million in assets across 17 different sectors. But to everyone here, I was still the girl who couldn't get her act together. The next morning, I woke up in my downtown loft, the one I had purchased under an LLC 3 years ago when I got tired of renting my neighbors. Thought I was house-sitting for some wealthy, absent owner I never corrected. Then I made coffee in my imported Italian espresso machine and opened my laptop to review the quarterly reports from Marcus's company. Hartwell Consulting had grown significantly over the past year, landing several major contracts with Fortune 500. Companies Marcus had hired 12 new employees, moved to a larger office space, and increased his own compensation package by 30%. He was living well, very well, and he had no idea that every dollar of profit ultimately flowed to me. Something had changed in recent months. According to the detailed reports my corporate accountants prepared, Marcus had been making decisions without consulting the board of directors, decisions that technically required majority shareholder approval. He had signed a 5-year lease on premium office space, approved hefty retention bonuses for senior staff, and committed to a major expansion into the Seattle market, all without proper authorization. More troubling were the personal expenses being run through the company account: country club memberships, luxury car leases, expensive dinners that barely qualified as business entertainment. Marcus was treating the company like his personal piggy bank, which would have been fine if he actually owned it, but he didn't. I called Sarah, my attorney and corporate specialist. We had worked together for years, structuring my various acquisitions and investments. She understood the delicate nature of my family situation and had helped me maintain my anonymity while protecting my interests. Emma? She said when she answered the phone, I was wondering when you'd call. How was the service? Exactly what you'd expect, I said. Marcus gave a beautiful speech about family loyalty and taking care of each other. The irony must have been overwhelming. She said, Sarah had been with me from the beginning. She knew every shell company, every hidden investment, every silent bailout I had orchestrated. I need to discuss some concerns about Hartwell Consulting. I told her about Marcus's recent unauthorized expenditures, about the expansion plans that had been approved without board consent, about the general sense that he was operating as if he owned 100% of the company instead of 40%. We could send a formal notification, she suggested, require him to provide detailed justifications for major expenditures going forward. Establish some oversight. Or I said we could call a shareholders meeting. Sarah was quiet for a moment. That would require revealing your ownership position. Yes, it would. Are you ready for that conversation? I looked around my loft at the life I had built while everyone thought I was failing, at the degrees hanging on my wall that no one knew I had earned, at the financial statements scattered across my desk, showing assets they couldn't imagine I owned. I think it's time. The shareholders meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. Marcus received the official notification on Tuesday, delivered by courier to his office, along with copies of all relevant corporate documents proving the ownership structure he had apparently forgotten about or chosen to ignore. I arrived at the conference room 15 minutes early, wearing a tailored black suit and carrying a leather portfolio filled with 8 years of financial records. Sarah sat beside me, along with James Morrison, a corporate attorney who specialized in shareholder disputes. Marcus walked in, looking confused and slightly annoyed. Emma, he said, taking a seat across from us. What's this about? I thought this was some kind of administrative thing. It is administrative, I replied, sliding a folder across the table. This contains a complete breakdown of my ownership stake in your company, as well as documentation of unauthorized expenditures that require board approval. Marcus opened the folder and I watched his face change as he read through the first few pages. His confident expression faded, replaced by something between confusion and panic. I don't understand. He said, this says you own 60% of Hartwell Consulting. That can't be right. It's completely accurate. Sarah said, every investment you've accepted from Meridian Capital, Westbridge Investment Group, and Summit Ventures was provided by Emma, operating through her holding companies. Each contribution was properly documented and resulted in equity conversion, according to the terms you signed. Marcus looked at me like I was a stranger. Where did you get this kind of money? I built it. I said, the same way you built your reputation, through careful planning, hard work, and strategic thinking. The difference is, I actually read the contracts I signed. This is impossible. Marcus said, I built this company from nothing. I'm the one who lands the clients, who manages the operations, who signs the payroll authorization, I interrupted, which comes from company accounts that I ultimately control, who approves the major expenditures which require my consent as majority shareholder, who decides strategic direction, which legally requires board approval. that you haven't been seeking. Sarah placed another document on the table. This is a formal resolution requiring all expenditures over $10,000 to receive written approval from the majority shareholder. It also requires monthly financial reports and quarterly strategic reviews. Marcus stared at the papers, his hands shaking slightly. Emma, you're my sister. We're family. This is my company. Your company that I funded. I said your company that I saved from bankruptcy twice, your company that wouldn't exist without my capital. And apparently my company since I own the controlling interest, but everyone knows me as the founder, the CEO. And you can continue in that role as long as you operate within the parameters of your actual authority. I'm not trying to destroy what you've built, Marcus. I'm trying to protect it from your reckless spending and unauthorized decisions. He looked defeated, smaller than I had. Ever seen him? What do you want? I want transparency. I want fiscal responsibility. And I want acknowledgement that this company exists because of my investment, not your networking skills. Over the following weeks, Marcus struggled to adjust to the new reality of having oversight. Suddenly, every major decision required justification and approval. The expensive dinners stopped. The luxury car lease was renegotiated. The premium office space was downsized to something more appropriate for the company's actual needs. The most difficult adjustment for Marcus was psychological. He had spent years introducing himself as the successful entrepreneur, the family golden boy, the brother who had made it while his sister worked retail. But now he was forced to confront the truth that his success had been built on my invisible foundation. I didn't take any pleasure in his discomfort. I felt sad for him, sad for the way our family had created this dynamic where success was measured by visible achievements and public recognition while the actual work of building wealth remained hidden. But I also felt relief finally being able to operate in the light instead of the shadows. 6 months after Mom's funeral, I called a family meeting at my loft. It was the first time most of them had seen where I actually lived. Dad arrived in his wheelchair with his caregiver. Marcus came alone, looking subdued and distant. Aunt Patricia brought her husband, Bob, who had always been skeptical of my choices. I served coffee and pastries from the French bakery downstairs. Then I opened my laptop and connected it to the large screen on my living room wall. I want to show you something, I said. The screen displayed a corporate organizational chart with Quantum Financial Solutions at the top and dozens of subsidiary companies branched out below it. Hartwell Consulting was there, along with the assisted living facility where Dad lived, the treatment center, where Mom had received care, the real estate investment trust that owned several properties downtown, and the private equity firm that held stakes in various local businesses. This is my actual career, I said, pointing to the screen. This is what I've been building while you all thought I was wasting my life. Selling books. Dad wheeled himself closer to get a better look. Emma, he said quietly. Is this real? It's all real. I said, I've been managing these investments for 8 years. I have degrees in computer science and business finance. I employ 47 people across various entities. I pay more in taxes than most people make in salary. But the bookstore, Aunt Patricia said, looking confused, is a cover. I said, a place where I can work quietly without drawing attention to what I'm actually doing. Most of my real work happens online or in private meetings with attorneys and accountants. Marcus sat silently staring at the screen. I could see him processing the implications, realizing that everything he thought he knew about our family dynamics had been wrong. Why didn't you tell us? Dad asked. Because I learned early that being invisible was safer. I said when I tried to contribute to family discussions about business or money, you all dismissed me as the dropout, the failure. It was easier to let you believe that than to constantly defend my choices. I pointed to another section of the chart. This is the fund that paid for Mom's treatments. This is the trust that covers your assisted living expenses. Dad, this is the entity that owns Marcus's company building, which is why his rent is so affordable. You've been supporting all of us, Aunt Patricia said, her voice barely a whisper. Not supporting. I corrected. Investing. I don't give away money. I structure everything as legitimate business arrangements. Loans that convert to equity, real estate purchases that generate rental income, strategic investments that create long-term value. But why? Marcus finally spoke up. Why keep it secret? Why let everyone think? Because secrets have power, I said. And because I needed to know who you all really were when you thought I had nothing to offer. The room was quiet, except for the hum of my espresso machine and the distant sound of traffic outside. I had waited 8 years for this conversation, and now that it was happening, I felt strangely calm. Dad looked at me with new eyes. Emma, I'm proud of you. I should have been proud of you all along. I know, Dad, and you were in your way. You just didn't know what to be proud of. Over the following months, our family relationships gradually shifted. Marcus remained CEO of his company, but he operated with new humility and respect for the financial structures that supported his success. He stopped taking credit for achievements that belonged to collaborative efforts, and he started asking for my advice on strategic decisions, Dad, and I began having weekly dinners where we discussed business philosophy and market trends. I discovered that his generation's understanding of wealth building, while different from mine, contained valuable lessons about patience and long-term thinking. Aunt Patricia became one of my biggest champions, telling everyone who would listen about my success, though I asked her to be discreet about the details I wasn't ready for. Public attention, and I valued the ability to continue operating behind the scenes. The most significant change was in how I viewed my own choices. For years, I had felt like I was living a double life, maintaining the fiction of being an underachiever, while building an empire in secret. But I realized that the secrecy itself had been a strategic choice, not a limitation. It had given me freedom to take risks, to make mistakes, to learn and grow, without the pressure of public scrutiny. I kept the bookstore. Not because I needed the income, but because I genuinely enjoyed the quiet rhythm of recommending books to customers, having conversations about literature, and maintaining a space where people came to discover new ideas. It grounded me, in a way that boardrooms and financial statements couldn't. 6 months later, Marcus called an all-hands meeting at Hartwell Consulting to announce the company's most successful quarter in its history. He stood at the front of the conference room, looking confident but not arrogant as he presented the growth numbers and outlined plans for sustainable expansion. At the end of his presentation, he did something unexpected. He acknowledged the company's investors, specifically mentioning the strategic partnership that had enabled their success. He didn't name me directly. We had agreed to maintain my privacy. But he made it clear that the company's achievements were the result of collaborative effort, not individual brilliance. After the meeting, Marcus approached me as I gathered my papers. Emma, he said, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you recognition for everything you've built. You don't owe me anything. I said, we're family and family supports each other, even when that support is invisible. He nodded, but I could see he was still processing the full extent of how our relationship had changed, how his understanding of success and achievement had evolved. That evening, I sat in my loft reviewing quarterly reports from my various investments. The numbers were strong across all sectors. My patient long-term approach to wealth building was paying off exactly as I had planned, but the real satisfaction came from knowing that I had chosen this path on my own terms. I had spent years being underestimated, dismissed, and ignored while quietly building something substantial and lasting. I had learned to find strength in silence, to derive power from being undervalued, to create success without needing external validation. The funeral that had started this revelation seemed like a lifetime ago. Mom would have been amazed to learn what I had accomplished, but I think she would have been most proud of how I had done it, with integrity, with strategic thinking, and with genuine care for family, even when that family didn't fully appreciate my contributions. Now, as I looked out at the city lights from my 23rd floor windows, I felt something I had never experienced before. The peace that comes from being fully known and valued for who you actually are, not who people assume you to be. I opened my laptop and began drafting a new business plan, this time for a venture that wouldn't be hidden. A foundation focused on supporting women entrepreneurs who needed not just capital but mentorship and strategic guidance. Women who, like me, had big dreams but limited access to traditional funding sources. I would call it the Emma Foundation, and for the first time in 8 years, I would put my name on something publicly, proudly, without apology or explanation. The next morning, I called Sarah to begin the legal process of establishing the foundation as a separate entity. From my other holdings, this would be different from my previous investments. This would be about creating opportunities for others to build their own invisible empires, to find strength in being underestimated, to transform secrets into power. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Mom's funeral had marked not just the end of her life, but the beginning of mine. At least the beginning of living it openly, honestly, and with the full force of everything I had built while everyone was looking the other way, I had learned that success isn't always about being seen. Sometimes it's about seeing yourself clearly, knowing your worth, independent of others' recognition, and building something so solid, so substantial, that when you're ready to step into the light, you do so not as a surprise, but as a revelation of what was always true. The little bookstore downtown still had my name on the schedule 3 days a week. I would continue to show up, to recommend novels to strangers, to discuss philosophy over coffee, to maintain that quiet space where ideas flourished away from the noise of achievement and ambition. But I would also step into boardrooms with confidence, speak at financial conferences with authority, and mentor young women who carried big dreams and small bank accounts. I would be both the quiet bookstore employee and the successful investor, both the supportive sister and the majority shareholder, both the family disappointment and the family foundation. Because I had learned that identity is not singular, that success can be invisible, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you while you build something extraordinary in the shadows. The story of my brother's company, my family's support systems, and my own journey from perceived failure to actual success would remain mostly private. But the lessons I had learned about patience, strategic thinking, and the value of being undervalued, those lessons I would share with other women who were tired of being dismissed, who were ready to build their own empires, who understood that sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all, but simply succeeding. So completely, so thoroughly, that when the truth is finally revealed, it speaks for itself. I closed my laptop, poured myself a cup of coffee, and walked to the window looking out at the city, where I had quietly built a fortune while everyone thought I was barely getting by. The view was beautiful, and for the first time in 8 years, I didn't have to hide how much I enjoyed it.